The reality is you can't do those three things at once. You can be participating in three things probably badly. So you've got to go back and read that page of your book again because you haven't quite got it, or you pause the telly and go back because you haven't quite got it, or in a conference call, you know you've missed something, or you know when someone's missed something. When you go, so Paul, what do you think? And there's a big pause.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Graham from Thinking Focus.
And the question is, why do people with the longest to-do lists often get the least done?
The question is from Thinking Focus, a podcast about how we sometimes get in our own way and what we can do about it.
So why is that? Why do people who have the most things to do, people who are busy and running around all the time, seem to end up doing nothing?
I think there's a couple of things in there, Paul. I think the first thing is people running around who appear like they're busy may not actually have a to-do list.
Right, so busy idiot syndrome. Yeah.
So they may not even be working from a to-do list. So I think there's that category of people.
Yes.
We're just busy. We're not quite sure what we're busy doing. I think there are the people then who are great at writing to-do lists, but not so great at following it. And I think the challenge with a to-do list...
That would be me.
I think the challenge with a to-do list is the doing piece of it. So just writing a list of things is never going to help you be organised unless you do something with that list.
Yes. And there's also this kind of multitasking idea in the middle of this, isn't there? So the idea that I mean, and I know there's kind of the cliche that men are rubbish at multitasking.
I can't, yeah.
Women are great at
I'm
multitasking.
a cliche.
But none of that's really true, is it?
No.
Because actually everybody's bad at multitasking because it takes time to swap tasks.
Yeah, everybody's bad or everyone's potentially good at it. I think it's one of those, it's about habits and behaviours, I think.
Yes.
So you could be good at multitasking. The reality is you won't be doing two things at the same time, though. So that aspect of multitasking, you may over the course of a day or a certain amount of time be doing more than one thing. So I'm doing a bit of this. I can't do any more now, so I'll go back to it later. Therefore, I'll do a bit of this. But that's not really what I'd see as multitasking.
Yeah, because that's a very different description. Because what you've described, I think, is going, somebody is focused on something and recognising when they've reached an impasse.
Yeah.
Accepting they need to put that down and picking something else on the list, and probably doing that until they reach an impasse. Whereas this traditional view of multitasking is, I'm actually doing three things at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm reading a book, I'm watching the telly, and I'm doing this conference call.
Yeah, and the reality is you can't do those three things at once. You can be participating in three things probably badly.
Yes.
So you've got to go back and read that page of your book again because you haven't quite got it, or you pause the telly and go back because you haven't quite got it, or in a conference call, you know you've missed something, or you know when someone's missed something. When you go, so Paul, what do you think? And there's a big pause.
Yeah, and I think particularly, in sort of corporate environments where you get these all-company conference calls or large audience conference calls. And I mean, you must have done this, I've definitely done this, where I've probably been kind of half listening and doing some emails and going, well, I've got to be on this call, so here's a really effective use of my time to do something that I actually care about. And then they say something really important. And your attention's drawn back to the call. But of course, you've not heard any of the things that led up to it.
Yeah.
So now you're dealing with something without context.
Yeah, and some people won't acknowledge that they've missed the context. So I'm pushing you for a decision based on the conversation that you've just missed. But rather than go, I've not heard what you just said, they'll make a decision based on false information or not all the information they could do. So I think back to so conference call as an example. If a conference call is something you need to do, it's on your to-do list for a certain amount of time, it's being present in that conference call. It's not multitasking that with something else because, again, you're not effective at the two or three things you're trying to do. It's like watching the TV and reading a book at the same time. You will miss something. So you asked the question about to-do lists and people with the longest to-do list getting the least amount of work done or the least things achieved. I think the challenge with the to-do list, as mentioned before, is we just add and add and add to it. I think there's a stage that says when you've got stuff on your to-do list, actually, how have you really planned it in? Where have you planned it in? And when are you actually going to do it? It shouldn't be the thing at the end of the day you go, I didn't do those 10 things that I've written down, but I did these 3 other things, so I'll add them to the list so I can cross them off, and then I feel good about my to-do list. I think it's about having a list of things And it's probably not even a daily activity. It's every couple of days, every 2 or 3 days, just sitting back and about prioritising or reprioritising what those things are and when you're actually going to do them.
Now, that's really interesting you say that, because one of the things I see a lot now is this kind of difference between, and it comes from the IT world, this difference between agile and waterfall type thinking. And we are trained to think in a waterfall way. We are trained to think in a plan it, do it, review it type way.
Yeah.
But there's a fundamental kind of assumption that sits under that type of approach, which is everything you need to know to plan it.
Yeah.
And that becomes quite a rarity these days.
Yeah.
I find myself often planning stuff, and actually the first version of the plan has actions like find out what this is, find out how we do this, find out who needs to be involved. Because I don't know any of the things I need to know, and the plan evolves over a time. So I've moved into a much more agile way of working, where I'm constantly looking at things and going, even if last week I said I think the plan looks like this, my first question is, what does it look like now? What actually needs to be done now, knowing what I know, which may not have been what I knew yesterday.
Yeah, and I think some people on a plan of action, they'll forget to build in time about finding stuff out.
Yes.
So I've coached people, done some career coaching with people in the past where people aren't happy in the job that they're doing right now. So when you talk to them about kind of what they might want to do, how can we help them to focus on the job, the job at hand, and can they be happy at work? And if the conversation then gets to, actually, I think I need to move on, they think they have to make a decision about what they're going to do next. It's almost like, I know I need to move, now I need to decide what I'm going to do today. No, you don't. You can build in a time that says, by when will you have found out what you think is the right career for you? You mentioned kind of if you're planning some stuff or finding some things. I might be working on a project. I might have an activity that says engage stakeholders. Well, my first task is finding out who my stakeholders are. And I think we miss that step sometimes.
Yeah, and I think even when you do accept that step, there's still a belief that it's a one-time hit.
Yeah.
So I'll take your example of finding stakeholders. Right, we're going to go out and find out who the stakeholders are. We're going to draw up a list, and they therefore are the stakeholders for the rest of the project. But if that's a 3-year project, that's just an unachievable goal.
Yeah, I think even a 3-day project is
possibly,
let alone 3 years. But I think there's something about we find comfort in having a list.
We do because again, emotionally, we crave certainty.
Yeah.
So the kind of really raw animal part of the mind likes things to be certain. It likes things to be black or white.
Yeah.
And so I think some of those behaviours come from that kind of deep emotional comfort of it's certain, a list is certain, a plan is certain, I am doing these things. Without kind of going, is the plan the right plan?
Yeah.
Is it going to achieve?
And I think, just picking up on what you said there, I think there's a difference between having a list and having a plan.
This is true.
And I think a lot of people have a list and think, I now know what I'm doing. What the difference for me between it being a list and a plan would be, I've got 20 things on my to-do list. It's a list. I've got 20 things to do on my to-do list with a date of when I'm going to start doing them and when it will be completed is a plan. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of people. They have a to-do list, not a to-do plan.
Yes. And I would then go one step further and say, with an agile thought, it needs an outcome.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I've noticed very much, I'm going to be geeky and root back to my technical past, but we teach people very much how to manage the inputs, not the outputs. We teach people how to plan their time around a fixed number of activities. But the reality is now, most people in most businesses aren't given input type goals. Your objectives aren't do this 30 times over the next 6 months. They are achieve this number or this project goal. And we can create more activities and more options and more ideas about how we're going to achieve that goal than we possibly have time for.
Yes.
So the skill has changed to going. So I almost think back to when I started in work, the skill I was expected to have was, here is what you need to do. Can you organise and plan that into the time available? And I don't think that's true anymore. I think the skill now is going, here is where you get. Can you make the choices about how you use the time available the most effectively to get to that outcome? And that means choosing not to do things as well as choosing to do things.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, what I see in organisations is I think you're right, there is a move to more outcome type goals. Yes. I think the management of people is often still managed around the process, not the outcome, though.
It is. We manage the inputs because they're easy to measure.
Yeah. So you need to do that. Have you done these things to get there?
Yes.
Well, actually, that's not what my target is. My target is to achieve that, or my goal is to achieve that. And why aren't we managing on that? And I think there are companies that are, by the way.
Yeah. No, I can remember back many years ago running a sales group and inheriting a sales guy and being told by his previous manager and somebody else who'd managed him that he'd be a problem because he didn't really work all week, and he was known for kind of not being there by 4:00 on a Friday. And yet he hit his target every year and going, well, what's the problem?
Yeah.
We've got other people who are really struggling to do their number, who really need help. That's the priority, not the guy who managed, okay, maybe we can give him a bigger target.
Yeah.
But in the bigger scheme of things, actually, if he's worked out how to effectively manage his time, but isn't doing it the way I would do it, why should I care?
Yeah. And I think a to-do list or a to-do plan can be a really effective way of managing your time. If we're actively using, you mentioned about stakeholders, you do stakeholder lists now, it's going to change within a matter of days or weeks, whatever it might be. Your to-do list is going to change throughout the day. So I think what people do tend to do is maybe at the start of a week or start of a day, they have a list of things they want to do. Other stuff happens during the day. So then end of the day comes around, we review that list and go, I didn't do some of that stuff. That's why we add the 3 things on that they have done, because it makes us feel better about having achieved something. If the reality, if we'd looked at that list at the start of the day and actually prioritised it and gone, actually, what of this stuff do I need to get done today? Those 10s, maybe only 3 of them need to get done today. We don't need to have all 10 on our list for today. And I think that's when the good use of a diary or of a calendar, something where we can go, I've planned it in, I've put it into whatever system I use to plan it, so it'll pop up and remind me when I should be starting. I think would be a much more effective way of managing our time than just having a traditional to-do list.
Okay, so I think in summary what you're saying to me is that the reason the people with the longest to-do lists often don't get as much done isn't about the list at all. It's about their approach to how they plan their time. It's the mindset around deciding what's important and what's not important at any point in time.
Yeah.
And I guess in a modern business, the gaps between how often we had to do that are getting shorter because there's more information and there's more change than we've ever had before.
Yeah. As with many things, Paul, I think when we talk to people, it's about the thinking and it's about the habits and the behaviours that are caused by the thinking or not, as it may be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next time on The Question Is.
If we're going to employ some really useful tactics or techniques to enable us to get closer to what we want to achieve, the definition of a goal causes you to perhaps do 2 or 3 or 4 things that are really useful to help you to get there.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.